All right. So today it's going to be a little different. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. This podcast is going to be pretty special. I've been thinking about how to do this podcast for a while now. I first want to start off by saying I apologize. The reason why I'm apologizing is because since I made the crossover from firearms to archery, I've basically been an ostrich with my head in the sand. I've been so focused on bow hunting and, prepping my bow for archery season and all this other stuff that I really have not been paying any attention to anything firearms related. There's a House bill that passed the House and is going to the Senate. It is a very frustrating bill. I care about our Second Amendment rights. I mentioned quite a bit about my thoughts and perspective on the Second Amendment and what I felt like we should be doing going forward as a community. If you didn't catch that, it's chapter 19 in my book, Student of the Woods. Shameless plug, but really does a good job of articulating what the Second Amendment is, how it should be interpreted, kind of how it applies to us today from a modern day perspective, and why it's still important, and kind of the things that we need to do to move forward as a community to actually be productive in this firearms safety and education conundrum that we happen to be in right now. The conundrum being that nobody really knows what to do. Well, the root causes are pretty obvious if you really look at it. You don't even have to really look at it. We're going to talk about it here. I've got some paperwork already prepared. I've got House Bill 1240. I've actually got some paperwork I printed off from the Alliance of Gun Responsibility, Gun Violence in Washington State by the numbers. So that'll be really interesting to take a look at, and we'll touch on those numbers and what they look like. The first thing I want to do here is I want to tell you what the Second Amendment is. Some people have a rough idea. They know it's like the right to bear arms and it's the right to own arms and stuff like that. But I'm going to read it verbatim so that everybody here watching and listening is on the same page. So if you want to watch this, by the way, it's on YouTube, and it'll be, if you want to listen to it, it's on our podcast. The Second Amendment as follows: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's a lot of key words here in this statement in your Second Amendment rights, which apply to all U.S. citizens, not just Washingtonians or Texans or New York citizens. It's all U.S. citizens. Okay, a well-regulated militia. What is a militia? If you put this in context, in 1776, the militia was the people. It's an able-bodied group of people that are capable of standing up for themselves and fighting against a tyrannical government. And don't let the wool pull over your eyes here, folks. The government, any and all governments, possess the ability to be tyrannical. They are comprised of people voted for, in this particular country, by the people. Their intentions grow and change. Their morals, their ethics grow and change as people age. Anyone can say that, okay? Who you are when you are 19 is not who you are when you're 70. Hopefully, we've voted for the right people and put them in place. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that a well-regulated militia, the militia is you. Now, I'm not saying get crazy, organize into a small paramilitary organization. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. A well-regulated militia, the militia being you, the people, the Washingtonians of Washington State, the Texans of Texas, the Californians of California, so on and so forth. The people within every free state, those are the potential militia. Potential, because they're only ever used in a time of crisis or war in an effort to defend themselves from oppression. So let's just keep that in mind. A well-regulated touches on the point of education. When you put it into context, education. Everybody in the militia needs to be educated on the proper use and storage of a firearm. Your education in firearms safety is necessary to the security of a free state. It says it right there in the Second Amendment, people. It's necessary to the security of a free state that you understand how to properly use, take care of, and store a firearm. The right of the people, this is your right, to keep and bear arms. Keep meaning to keep in the home, bear meaning to carry on you. Arms, firearms. It doesn't specifically say pistols, rifles. Your level of arms in 1776 was the same as the military. Everybody had the same firearms. With one exception, not everybody had a cannon at their house. Let's be a little realistic. So to that extent, you could say that not everybody needs a bazooka, okay? Not everybody needs a 40 mil grenade launcher on their AR-15. Not everybody needs full auto firearm, okay? But A semi-automatic firearm, that's almost just as good in a self-defense situation that we're talking about, okay? We're not talking about the humdrum self-defense situation where you're walking down the street, you need to defend yourself. We're talking about defense against oppression from tyrannical government. Okay, I'm not saying our government is tyrannical at the moment, but the Second Amendment was written to help give you the right to make sure that you don't lose your ability to obtain, maintain, and keep firearms for the purposes of defending yourself. Okay? That's what the Second Amendment is for. It's to help ensure that you get the proper education and to make sure that you don't lose your rights to own and bear arms. Before I forget, that last line shall not be infringed. Infringed means impinged or undermined. It shouldn't be altered. If we're putting it into context, which we should, infringed means altered, hindered, undermined. This is a contract between us and the government realizing, acknowledging that we have rights, this is our right, and it should not be infringed, ever. That's the Second Amendment. Now, this big stack of papers here, about 15 of these pages of paper, is House Bill 1240, HB 1240. I'm just going to read a little bit of it here, so bear with me. It says, an act relating to establishing firearms-related safety measures to increase public safety by prohibiting the manufacture, importation, distribution, selling, and offering for sale of assault weapons. So first of all, they're marketed as semi-automatic rifles, all right? And that's most everything on this list is a semi-automatic rifle, a variant of, and what I mean by that is there are semi-automatic shotguns are also on this list, offering for sale of assault weapons and by providing limited exemptions applicable to licensed firearm manufacturers and dealers for purposes of sale to armed forces branches and law enforcement agencies. The only people that are going to be allowed after this thing passes to purchase a semi-automatic rifle are going to be armed forces and law enforcement. They are a branch of the government. So if you have a situation where the government decides to turn on its people, well, those are the only people that are allowed to purchase semi-automatic rifles now. Armed forces branches and law enforcement agencies, and for purposes of sale or transfer outside the state, and to inheritors reenacting and amending the RCW that I listed before, adding new sections to the chapter, creating a new section prescribing penalties, and declaring an emergency. They want to declare an emergency with this House Bill 1240. They feel like semi-automatic rifles and long guns like shotguns pose an imminent threat and danger to Washingtonians alike. And I'm going to take some time here today to show you that that is not the case. Okay? This bill uses inflammatory language out of context, which paints a picture that your safety is at risk due to the ability of Washingtonians being able to go out and purchase semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. Anything with a detachable box magazine or a collapsible stock or a suppressor, a flash hider, things like this. All these little pieces of furniture that you put on your firearm to either reduce recoil, to help the end user manage the shot better so that when they're using the rifle or the shotgun, they're not going to, have a miss on a second follow-up shot or whatever the case may be. They want to ban all that stuff. So this new section, Section 1, the legislator finds and declares that gun violence is a threat to the public health and safety of Washingtonians. There, they make that declaration right there. It's line 12 through 14 in the new section, Section 1 on this House Bill 1240. They state that they find and declare that gun violence is a threat to the public health and safety of Washingtonians. Assault weapons are civilian versions. This is how they define it. Assault weapons are civilian versions of weapons created for the military and are designed to kill humans quickly and efficiently. That's inflammatory language, and I'll tell you why. Because all firearms are designed with the purpose of being able to adequately defend the end user, that be the person wielding the firearm. Otherwise, we would all be running around with muskets trying to defend ourselves from whoever. It's disgusting to see language like that, because what they're trying to do is get the reader of the House bill to think that all you Washingtonians are at risk, okay, because these semi-automatic rifles and shotguns are so effective at killing people. Well, so is a handgun, okay? So is a revolver. A Ruger SP-101 is just as effective at killing someone as a rifle. So is a car. So is a plane. For this reason, the legislature finds that assault weapons are like, that's generalizing statement. You shouldn't use generalizing statements when you're trying to, in my opinion, when you're trying to enact a law or a regulation. You want to be specific as you can be, but they leave generalizing verbiage in there so that they can use that law and apply it how they see fit. That's why you see words like assault weapons and like an M16 or type of firearm like this. Because if they feel, they being the lawyers, that they can make a case that the firearm you happen to use or possess or carry or have in your home fits within this mold, then they can take it from you and charge you with a penalty. So they're like M16 rifles and thus are weapons most useful in military service. Assault weapons have been used in the deadliest mass shootings in the last decade. Okay, pay attention to this, people. House Bill 1240. Weapons most useful in military service. Assault weapons have been used in the deadliest mass shootings in the last decade. In Washington or the entire U.S.? Are we trying to legislate based on what happens on the East Coast, what happens in Texas, what happens in California? Or are we trying to legislate and create laws to help better protect our people based on what's happening here in our own state? Because if you take a look over the last 30 years, there's less than 5 shootings that involve an actual weapon that fits the description they give for assault weapons. And yet they want you to believe your health and safety are in imminent danger. An assailant with an assault weapon can hurt and kill twice the number of people than an assailant with a handgun or non-assault rifle. This is because the additional features of an assault weapon are not merely cosmetic. See, they're trying to address like the forward grip that you might have on an assault rifle, assault weapon, semi-automatic rifle, pump shotgun, okay? You wouldn't be able to have that assist grip on a pump shotgun to help you manipulate that shotgun as a shooter. No, because that pistol grip is going to be banned. Can't have that because it's not merely cosmetic. Rather, these are features that allow shooters to fire large numbers of rounds quickly. You're still governed by the amount of ammo you have in your box magazine. You can only shoot the firearm as fast as the cyclic rate of that firearm will allow you to shoot. You can't shoot any faster than that unless you've converted your semi-automatic rifle to an automatic rifle. That is federally illegal. If you were to use, for instance, a bump stock, you might be able to increase your rate of fire slightly, only because you're reducing the amount of time it takes for your finger to do this. You're reducing the amount of time, because with a bump fire stock, when you know what you're doing, because it's not easy to do, you can brace your shoulder, hold your finger in one position, and the recoil of the firearm and the spring in the stock allows the rifle to oscillate in your grip, which then causes the rifle to do all that finger work, and you're just standing there as it shoots. But you're still never going to be able to exceed the cyclic rate or the mag capacity of that firearm. So if you want to do like a 10-round mag regulation, which they've already done, then okay, got it, fine. I might be able to understand that a little bit. But even still, like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk to you about cases here in the last 30 years, dating all the way back, almost 40 years, 1983. We're going to go that far back and talk about these cases where not only did they not use any assault weapon. I'm sorry. Not only did they not use any assault weapons, except for like 3 or 5 instances, but it's not what this bill would lead you to believe. This bill leads you to believe that at any moment you walk out that door and someone with an assault weapon is running around the streets trying to shoot everybody they can. And that's not the case. It allows the shooters to fire large numbers of rounds quickly. An analysis of mass shootings. Okay, so now they're speaking to a specific demographic of shooting incidents. Okay, they're talking about mass shootings, or metric, not demographic. They're speaking to a specific metric of shootings, which is mass shootings, that result in 4 or more deaths. 4 or more deaths. Found that 85% of those fatalities were caused by an assault weapon. Okay. It's the spray and pray method. And if you don't know or haven't heard that term or phrase before, it's basically you're shooting wildly as fast as you can, trying to inflict as much harm as you can. Okay. Now, the place where they get this information is the same place I went for information. They're right. It states that 85% of those fatalities were caused by an assault weapon, and that an assault weapon is twice as effective as a pistol or a lever action or any other kind of firearm that might be used in an instance of a mass shooting. Okay, but here's what it doesn't articulate. If you look at the information, which I will show you here in this clip, so if you want to see the info, you got to go to the YouTube channel to see it. If you look at the information and you see the numbers, what it's going to show you is that, wow, there's a lot of people that get killed or injured in mass shootings involving assault weapons, which is true. But also look at the number related to handguns. And you're going to see that the number of people that die in a mass shooting involving a handgun is near 100%, with very minimal injuries, non-life threatening. Whereas, yes, an assault weapon can injure more people, but their efficacy or their kill ratio, I guess you could say, is a lot lower by comparison. So what does that tell you? That tells you, looking at those numbers, that if you find yourself involved as a victim in a mass shooting and that shooter is wielding an assault weapon, you're more likely to be injured than killed. Whereas a shooter wielding a handgun, you're more likely to die than be injured. Pretty interesting. I would not have thought about that or seen it in that ratio, that aspect. But as soon as I saw the numbers, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, less people are involved in the shooting, but more people die in a mass shooting involving a handgun than with an assault weapon. It's crazy. And here's why it's crazy. Over 80% of mass shootings in the U.S. involve a handgun, not an assault weapon. Isn't that interesting? They make it sound like mass shootings with assault weapons are taking up all this real estate in the metrics of shootings, specifically mass shootings. But they don't. Crazy. I would not have thought that. I want to finish reading this this section 1 here. So the legislator also finds that this regulation is likely, again, generalizing statement, to have an impact on the number of mass shootings committed in Washington. No, it's not. And I'll tell you why. Because mass shootings committed in Washington, by and large, with a handgun, not an assault weapon. And you'd be surprised to know that quite a number of them involve a lever action 30-30. We'll continue. Studies have shown that during the period the federal assault weapons ban was in effect, to let you all know, it ran for 10 years, 1994 to 2004. And there were 70%, I'm sorry, let me go back here. Studies have shown that during the federal assault weapons ban was in effect, mass shooting fatalities were 70% less likely to occur. Okay, you had less mass shootings, in that time period, that 10-year time period. Sure. Okay, but if you go back. I employ you to do your due diligence and research the information against what I'm telling you, because who am I? I'm just regular Joe Schmo researching, all these different shootings through whatever's available publicly online, okay? And if you go back and you look at the numbers in 1994 through 2004, what you're going to find is all of the mass shootings with a handgun. Not an assault weapon. Not an assault weapon. Okay, handgun or rifle, like a lever action rifle, or a shotgun. Let's go back here for a second. The legislature also finds that the regulation is likely to have an impact. They don't know for sure. It's a guess. It's a guess. A guess. Man, we want to enact legislation and restrict or infringe rights based on guesses. Moreover, the legislature finds that assault weapons are not suitable for self-defense, and that studies show that assault weapons are statistically not used in self-defense. Okay, I will give you that studies that talk about self-defense with a firearm, most often it's with a handgun. But there are instances where people have defended other people's lives with an assault weapon. But here's the thing, you don't hear about them as often because it's people acting in self-defense. It's not people going on a wild killing spree. And so it doesn't stoke the same media coverage the news outlets want or need, because they need viewership, right? And so they're trying to get their numbers up by giving you the most sensational news they can find. But people do defend themselves with assault weapons. It absolutely does happen. Also, they're trying to say here, the legislature finds that assault weapons are not suitable for self-defense. Whatever they are. When you're talking about what we are talking about, the root of it, which is your ability to keep and bear arms that enable you to defend yourself against a potentially tyrannical government. An oppression brought about by a large group. Say we're invaded, and you need to defend yourself. You can do it with a lever action, a shotgun, and a couple of revolvers? No! If I'm the governor, if I'm the state representative, I want you to be adequately armed to defend yourself. So I want you to have semi-automatic rifles, semi-automatic shotguns. Okay, because our little military force here, our little law enforcement force here isn't going to stop a Red Dawn type of an incident. It could happen. To think that it couldn't is ridiculous. The moment you forget about history and start to think that you're above it all, that it could never happen to you, that's the moment that it could happen to you. So take that wool away from your eyes. You need those assault weapons to defend yourself against a potential overthrow of your government, or to defend yourself against your own government. Because if law enforcement and military are the only ones allowed to buy assault-style weapons, then you're hosed with your little 6-shot revolver and your lever action whatever and your bolt action rifle and your pump action shotgun. Like, you don't possess the ability to adequately defend yourself. I wouldn't infringe upon your ability to do that. Then our government, our state representatives should not be doing that. The legislator finds that assault weapons are not commonly used in self-defense. Not commonly, but it doesn't say that they're not at all used in self-defense. It just says not commonly, okay? So they're willing to make a generalizing statement as saying that they are not suitable for self-defense because they've concluded that they're not commonly used in self-defense. Come on. How can you make that statement when you want to argue the opposite in this previous portion by saying assault weapons have been used in the deadliest mass shootings in the last decade? They're designed to kill humans quickly and efficiently. So how can you say they're not good for the purposes of self-defense and also claim that they're efficient? Contradictory statements. That's what I'm saying, okay? They're misguiding, and it's an inflammatory argument all the way around. The legislator finds assault weapons are not commonly used in self-defense, and that any proliferation is not the result of the assault weapon being well suited for self-defense. So here they're trying to make that counter argument to what I just told you. They realize what they just said, and they're trying to throw in and out by saying, oh, well, it may have been used in some self-defense instances, but those should not be considered as the average. Okay, for that particular weapon platform. Rather, increased sales are, I'm sorry, I skipped a portion here. It says self-defense, and that any proliferation is not the result of the assault weapon being well suited for self-defense, hunting, or sporting purposes. Rather, increased sales are the result of the gun industry's concerted efforts to sell more guns to a civilian market. What? No! I used to work at a gun counter. I used to sell guns at Sportsman's Warehouse in Federal Way. Okay? And I'll tell you, every time that any gun ban or gun restriction was even remotely mentioned in the news, our gun sales went up. Stuff like this is why gun sales go up. Because people are afraid that the government, their state representatives, are going to take their rights away from them. And it said in the beginning that if you already possess it, this doesn't apply to you. The state representatives are causing the increase in gun sales, not the gun manufacturing companies, because guns sell themselves. You either have the money and you can afford to buy it, or you don't. You either have a safe and you can store it safely, or you don't. That's an inflammatory statement that totally bashes the gun industry as a whole, and that's just ridiculous. Okay. The legislature finds that the gun industry has specifically marketed these weapons as tactical, hyper-masculine, and military style in manner that overtly appeals to troubled young men. Now, I want you to pay attention for a second here. They literally state that the marketing campaigns that the gun industry puts out there target troubled young men. That's what they said. And I want you to think about that for a minute. The gun industry has specifically marketed these weapons as tactical, hyper-masculine, and military style in manner that overtly appeals to troubled young men, intent on becoming the next mass shooter. That I want you to also pay attention to also as I go over this information, because they're saying that there are troubled young men out there who are intent specifically on being the next mass shooter. You go back 40 years, there's only 2 instances where the mass shooter, or the shooter, I should say, because there was an instance where an individual shot somebody with an assault weapon, but wasn't a mass shooter. They shot one person, it was out of retaliation, and it was premeditated. And then the other instance, the person literally identified as a mass shooter, was boasting about it online before the event. Those are the 2 instances. I mean, really? We're going to try and generalize all of the people who've committed a heinous act with an assault weapon, state that they had that intent of becoming the next mass shooter, or rather, we're going to state that the gun industry is trying to target the next mass shooter with their advertising campaigns? That's ridiculous. The other thing I want to touch on there is troubled young men. And that's important because they're telling you what the issue is. By making that statement, they're telling you that there is a mental health issue here. If you know that the mental health of young men is the root cause of these issues, then why are we focusing on the firearm and not the mental health concerns here in Washington? Because I'm about to show you some numbers that are gonna really open your eyes here about the mental health in Washington, okay? Before I do that, that's the first 2 pages of the bill. The next 12 to 13 talk about either the firearms that they're specifically trying to ban, quite a few of which have never been used. But I should say like 98% of these, 99% of these have never been used in the state of Washington for the purposes of shooting, let alone mass shootings. Okay, so they want to ban all those guns that they state are, you're in danger of being shot with on that list. And there's a bunch of them. Okay, and then the next 10 pages talks about the definitions in the bill, explaining to you what'll happen if you do like a straw purchase, or talking about you can't go out of state and buy an assault weapon or an assault style weapon in like Idaho or Oregon or some other state where it might be legal, and then bring it back, because I think that would fall under the importation of an assault weapon into the state, and you would then be breaking the law. So that's what the rest of that bill goes over. Now here's what's funny. Not funny at all. Here's what's sad. Here's the numbers, okay? This is what's interesting. This is specific to Washington State. Now, the moments in House Bill 1240 where they talked about assault weapons being used in the deadliest mass shootings in the last decade, they took that information from a website that talks about mass shootings in the U.S., okay? Not specifically Washington, the US. And that's why I asked you, should we be legislating Washingtonians based on what happens elsewhere, or legislating in Washington based on what happens in Washington? Okay, because they want you to think and believe that your health and safety are in imminent risk. The information says exactly the opposite. What you need to do is do your due diligence, go online, check it out, see if I'm right, see if I'm wrong. It's bad. From the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, that's gunresponsibility.org if you want to go check this out online. Gun violence in Washington state by the numbers. This is some crazy facts. It says, now I will tell you that this was a kind of a survey of information involving shootings in Washington, all shootings in Washington, over a 5-year period, 2015 through 2019. Okay, so it says source, unless otherwise linked, data in this information I'm about to convey to you is from CDC Wonder, underlying cause of death, 5-year average, 2015 through 2019. Or if you want to learn how to be a part of the gun violence prevention movement, go to gunresponsibility.org. Okay, gun violence is a public health crisis impacting every corner of the state. Though every Washingtonian is impacted by the gun violence epidemic, we are not impacted equally. Interesting. These numbers help illustrate the crises in our communities. Okay, so let's hear some facts. Every year, on average, 781 Washingtonians are killed by guns. That's a rate of 10.2 per 100,000 people. So if you have 100,000 people in your city or county, 10.2 people died every year on average in your county between 2015 and 2019. I mean, that sounds like a lot. Someone is killed by a gun every 12 hours in Washington state. More than 75% of gun deaths in Washington state. Ooh, pay attention here. I'm about to tell you what the majority of shootings in Washington state involve. Okay? The majority. Because this is what your health and safety are all about. This statement right here. More than 75% on average every year of that 781 people are from suicide. People taking their own life with a firearm. Think they're doing that with an assault weapon? No, there might be a case here and there where an assault weapon was used to shoot themselves, or maybe they used a shotgun with maybe they used a semi-automatic shotgun, because that would fall under the assault weapons listed in the ban. Okay, but by and large, that ban that they talk about, that House Bill 1240, that's talking specifically about mass shootings. They say it in the verbiage of the bill that they're talking directly about mass shootings and how your health is at risk because assault weapons are used in all of the last decades, or not decades, are used in all of the deadliest mass shootings in the last decade. And that's a true statement, but not here in Washington. So more than 75% of gun deaths in Washington state are by suicide. That's a mental health issue, people. More than 75%. Troubled young men. Okay, I'm sure there's some troubled young women in there too, but I'm just saying, clearly we have a mental health issue. Clearly there is a problem with depression, and people feel like the only way to take care of that depression is to take their own life with a firearm. How did they get the firearm? They got it from the house, most likely. That's not a hard conclusion to draw. Maybe they got it illegally. If my daughter in my house took my firearm and shot herself with it, she obtained that firearm illegally. She didn't have my permission to take it. Okay? This brings me to 2 points here. Mental health is our concern, and keeping firearms unloaded, locked, and out of reach of youth, or anyone really, but youth specifically, is a must. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teens. I mean, I'm sure it is in relation to like heart disease, lung disease. You know, they're in perfect health otherwise, right? They're not getting hit by drunk drivers every day. So yeah, it's probably going to be a leading cause of death in teens. Gun violence costs Washington state an average of $5.3 billion every year. More than 34% of Washingtonians report having a firearm in their household. More than 34%, and here's an interesting fact. So that's more than a third of the people that own guns in Washington report having a firearm in their household. Okay. I'm not surprised that more people didn't take that poll and tell you, yeah, I have guns in my house. That number is probably higher, obviously, but most people don't want to feel comfortable giving out that kind of information. I wouldn't want to either. But I'm just arguing the House Bill 1240 here, and I'm stating some facts specific to Washington, which is how we should be legislating in our state is based on the numbers in Washington. Only 36% of people in gun-owning households practice safe storage. So a third of that 34% actually report having gun safes to properly store their firearms. 179 people have been fatally shot by Washington police since 2015. Crazy. That's a lot. It doesn't get into the particulars, but 179 people. More people are killed by guns than die in car accidents in Washington State. I'm not surprised by that. I mean, the way the car manufacturing industry is now, they aim so hard to make cars so safe, that I'm not surprised that less people die in car accidents every year, and we've got the seatbelt law and all that, and so it's just not surprising to me. It says Washington has the 40th highest rate of gun violence in the United States. We're 40th, and we're worried about assault weapons. This is ridiculous. You know what this House bill is? This is legislatures not knowing what to do about the mental health issue here in the state of Washington. This is legislators trying to pander to their constituents by passing something so it looks like they're making an effort to, attack gun violence and make a difference. This is not going to make a difference. It's just not going to do it because it's not attacking the root cause of the issue, which is mental health. It's not attacking that more than 75%, that suicide rate. That's high, man. Those I don't know the actual number. I will, offer that information up, but I will put money on the fact that most of those suicides do not involve an assault weapon. I would say probably most of them, it's either a handgun or a shotgun. I would think it's probably predominantly a pistol. Again, we're trying to pass legislation, not me. I'm not trying to do it. They're trying to pass legislation that would infringe upon your right to go out and buy a semi-automatic rifle or a semi-automatic shotgun because they believe your health is in imminent danger because of mass shootings. Right, okay. Now here's some interesting numbers, so listen up. More than 75% of the people that died every year during this survey were from self-inflicted wounds, okay, suicides. What do you think the number is for homicides, including domestic violence? Anybody? Nobody? 20%. 20%. That means if you add the two together, more than 95% of gun violence in Washington State doesn't even include mass shootings. They're not even on the radar yet. So I want you to take a second and think for yourself. What do you think that if you've got 95% is already been accounted for, okay, of that 781 people, how many in a percentage do you think die every year in a mass shooting here in Washington State? Just think about that for a second. 1%. There's another 1% that's listed as other. I don't know what falls under other. And then you have 3% is police involved. And that would most likely, in my opinion, that's, suicide by cop. That's police involved shooting where they're justified in defending themselves. 1%. 1%. Yet your health and safety are in imminent danger. Okay? Suicide. The vast majority of gun deaths in Washington State, more than 75% are suicides. White and American Indians and Alaska Native people have the highest rate of gun suicide at 8.8 and 8.3 per 100,000 people, respectively. Wow. That's crazy. Not only do we know there's a mental health issue, we know exactly which three ethnicities, white and American, three ethnicities are most likely going to, commit suicide by firearm. So why aren't we attacking that issue? Why aren't we trying to expand the mental health capabilities of schools? Okay, in an effort to try and keep those kids safer. And where do you think they're getting the guns from? We need to. Look, let's talk for a second. If you really want to make a difference on gun violence in Washington State, you need to do two things. One, you need to attack the mental health issue, and two, you need to attack the storage of the firearm issue. Okay, because those guns, whether they're being used in a suicide shooting or a mass shooting, are being obtained illegally. Okay, over 40 years, I can count on less than 4 fingers how many firearms were actually obtained legally. Our issue is not legally obtained firearms. Our issue is illegally obtained firearms, and more so than that, the mental health aspect of it. That's what our issue is. That's what we need to be focusing on. That's what we need to be addressing.